Everyone. My name is Jackson Buboltz. I own Elevated Insurance. And I think what a lot of people have really liked about working with Elevated Insurance is just how easy we make everything. And I know everyone has a really busy schedule right now. So what I wanted to do was just share what this process looks like when people meet with us to say, hey, I'm buying a house, I'm buying a new car, I'm looking for life insurance, or I'm getting off my parents' coverage and I just need something that makes sense. So I wanted to just kind of share what it looks like when people connect with us, when we walk through how auto insurance or home insurance or umbrella insurance works, make sure that everyone has all of their questions answered. That's really the biggest thing we look for, is making sure that people are comfortable and confident with either what they have and staying there, or understanding that the solution that Elevated has put together is a really strong one, and they're excited to work with us. So what I wanted to do in this video is just walk through how coverage and how pricing works. And this is really pretty standard for any insurance. This is what any insurance agency should be talking about, in my opinion. What I found is usually people say, hey, give me your information. Here's a price. What do you think? You need to be lower. Here's the lower price. And no one really knows what that means. So what I want to do is talk about what people are actually getting when they buy insurance, help folks understand before they get into a conversation, or if they're kind of thinking, maybe I should look at this, maybe I'm not, maybe I shouldn't, to get a better read on what they'd be getting into. And always, we want to make sure that people's questions are answered, and we always look to make a financial contribution to the community anytime someone opens up a conversation with us. So, this isn't coming from me, the owner. We are the #4 Google reviewed brokerage in the greater Milwaukee area. We're just outside the top 10 in the state. People say some really nice things about us. And I think the reason behind that is the basics of insurance. When you have a question, I make a phone call, I send an email, I expect someone to answer me. At Elevated Insurance, we're absolutely excellent at that. And in addition to providing really, really strong insurance coverage and service, there's also some other more benevolent pieces, which I think set us apart from really any, I would say, most brokers in the country. The reason that the community is excited to work with us and why we have hundreds of clients is the way that we give back. So every time that anyone gets a quote, whether they buy from us or not, we always make a donation locally. So that way, when good things are happening for us, when we have an opportunity to teach someone about how their coverage works, make sure they feel comfortable and confident with what they're getting into, we're also making a $10 donation into our community. So this year, we're well over the $2,000 mark for donations. And as an organization, in the first 3 years, we've been responsible for over $10,000 of direct cash into groups in the area that are helping people get where they're going, that are teaching people to fish, if you will. The other side is when people come on board, they know that we have this hashtag Elevate Wisconsin program. And what that means is if they ever want to do a habitat project, if they want to be part of one of the walks that are coming up in fall here in Wisconsin, maybe they're interested in doing a food drive or a book drive, we can make those really turnkey and help them get those off the ground for their church, for their school, for the company that they work with. And even if they don't want to get involved, they know that in the background, because they buy insurance through Elevated Insurance, these things are happening. So I think that helps people to feel proud of what they're getting and how they're going about their insurance. We're an independent broker, which means that we work with several different carriers. We can understand the situation of where you are now and figure out which carrier is probably going to provide the best pricing, the best coverage. And 2, 3, 5 years down the road, if we ever would get a renewal we're not excited about, we can turn around and shop that coverage and find the best fit. So a lot of people really like knowing that they can continue to work within the Elevated Insurance service and still have options with different carriers if they ever need it. So when I meet with everyone, the goal is to walk through coverage and pricing, make sure all your questions are answered, and then always have a next step set up so everyone knows, where this is going and what's expected if we're going to move forward or if we're going to part ways. So we always start every conversation with what's important to you. Maybe your dad or your brother or your neighbor said, hey, you have to have this coverage, or this coverage is a scam, don't take this. We want to know about all those things up front so we can be sure that we're addressing what's most important to you and providing the coverage that really makes sense for you and your family. We talk about the full solution, right? So we want to talk about auto, home, or renter's insurance, umbrella, and life insurance. And the reason we do that is we want to make sure that everyone has a really solid understanding of what's available and why these insurances, why these different types of coverage make sense. Now, not every client has every one of these lines of coverage, but we want to make sure that everyone knows what they're getting into and that they can always say, if we are going to pass now, we know that Elevated Insurance can help us in the future. Being someone who is, in my mid 30s, I have a young family. We bought a house a few years ago. I think a lot of people really like knowing that the life experiences they're going through right now are still pretty fresh in the staff's mind. And we can definitely relate to people as they're going through these adulting type phases of getting off their parents' insurance or buying their first house or things like that. So when you buy an insurance policy, there's actually two types of policies that you get with every policy. There's liability coverage, which is if there's a lawsuit, how does the insurance company act? And then there's physical damage, which I think is what a lot of us think about when we think insurance. So let's start with that physical damage. There's two components of how your insurance would kick in. There would be a comprehensive situation where you have a tree fall in your car, you hit an animal, what's the third one here? You have a windshield crack or someone breaks a window. Those are kind of acts of God. You can't do much to control those. So that's bucketed under comprehensive coverage. And then collision is just what it sounds like. You hit someone, it's your fault. Either way, we look at a deductible saying, how much am I willing to pay to have my vehicle repaired or replaced? So with newer vehicles, I typically recommend $500 or $1,000 deductible. Really kind of depends on the situation with the family. If they say, hey, we're looking to get the lowest possible price that we can for our coverage, then I would recommend the $1,000 deductible. If you're saying, hey, 1,000 might be tough for us to come up within a pinch, I'd say, hey, how does 500 sound? And we might go with that. If you have an older vehicle or a vehicle, you'd say, if it was in an accident, we would probably just get a new one, or it wouldn't be that big of a deal. We might look at liability only coverage, which still provides protection in a lawsuit situation, but is greatly going to reduce the premium because we're not providing coverage for the physical asset, which is the vehicle. There's a lot of things that you'll see on most insurance policies that are very blanket, and then you'll see some really above and beyond type coverage with some of the premium carriers that we work with. So almost every carrier is going to offer you roadside service, which means that if you have a flat tire, if you run out of gas, if you lock your keys in your car, if you have a dead battery or it's super cold and your car doesn't start, I mean, this is like the #1 claim that we have in winter. We have carriers that we can partner with where they can come out and help you for a deductible. We have carriers that say, hey, you already are a client. We're just going to take care of this without a deductible. We're not going to count it against next year's rates. So based on the type of service you're looking for, we can connect you with a carrier that's really going to meet your needs the way you want to be helped when you have a claim. If you're not able to drive a vehicle, maybe you want to work with a carrier that's going to provide a tow to the nearest dealership or auto body shop and not charge you for it. We have those relationships to be able to make that happen. And we also want to be sure that people have options for a rental car. If your car is in the shop or if it's totaled, that you have some time, you have a car that you can get to work, you can get to the dealerships and look for a new car if you have a totaled vehicle situation. And we want to make that experience as easy for our clients as possible. And we also work with some carriers that offer vanishing deductibles, which is fantastic. You go a year without a claim, your deductible drops $100. And again, working with premium brokers, premium insurance carriers is going to give us some of those additional options to really set ourselves up well for when something goes bad, because on a long enough timeline, something always happens. So that's why we have insurance, and that's why we feel really proud to provide coverage that's going to help people when they need it. Moving over to the liability side of it, again, this is if there's a lawsuit, how does the insurance company protect their clients? So what my general recommendation is here in Wisconsin is looking at $250,000, $500,000 liability. Now, the reason that I do that is if we look at all of the lawsuits in Wisconsin, if we look at kind of painting broad brushes, about 85% of claims are going to be less than this $250,000 of payout. So it's really strong coverage. It's well-rounded. And that's also going to step in if you're in an accident with someone who doesn't have enough insurance or they don't have any insurance. This coverage is going to make sure that you and your vehicle are still taken care of, even if the other person didn't plan ahead and get their coverage. You might ask, well, Jackson, what about that last 15% there? And that's where an umbrella policy comes in. So with an umbrella policy, what we're looking at is having an extra bubble of protection. So you have your initial policy, then an umbrella policy, And then someone can look at, hey, what is your house worth? What do your bank accounts look like? Things like that. So as a consultant to my clients, what we always want to do at Elevated Insurance is make sure that if something happens, you have the coverage in place that we can say, look, it's taken care of. We set this up correctly. Let's just get you back on your feet, and we'll take care of the insurance side of things. So that umbrella kicks in if either your auto policy or your homeowner's policy goes over its liability limit, then an umbrella policy can kick in. So at this point, when we're having those specific conversations, this is where we say, hey, there's a discount if you pay upfront for auto payments. There's also a monthly option, what works best for you. We talk about how the umbrella looks, and we stop and ask questions, because again, the most important part of this is making sure that all of our clients feel comfortable and confident that they know what we're talking about and that they're getting the coverage that makes the most sense for them. Switching over from the auto side of things to looking at dwelling. So obviously with that liability, again, if there's a lawsuit that happens on your property, so if you're renting, this can still happen, right? Someone falls on the steps, slips in the shower, cuts themselves. These are things where they can say, look, I don't have enough money to pay for these medical bills. I have to sue to help address some of the financial burden. I'm sorry, but this is what has to happen. So be it a renter's policy or be it the traditional homeowner's policy, there are liability coverages in here. I like to start at $500,000. If someone doesn't go with an umbrella, then I'd like to see them have $1 million of coverage, because again, that liability protection is that bubble between whatever happened and people being able to get to your personal assets. We'll keep moving to the physical damage, which is really what we all usually think about when we think about insurance. And there's three things with homeowners insurance that kind of confuse people. So I always want to go through those things in our presentations, make sure that everyone has a really good understanding of what they're getting into. One of the biggest pieces of confusion is looking at assessed value, which is what a home is worth today on the current market, what a buyer and seller agree to change the property for. And then the dwelling value, which is more of what insurance looks like, which essentially says, look, if your property turns into a hole in the ground, there's a total loss with a fire, there's a tornado, there's a hailstorm like we haven't seen in 100 years, how much is it going to cost us to build back your home? And that's what we look for with dwelling value. So that's the number that we always target when understanding how to protect a home and at what value to put it at. There's several different ways to go about it. One of my favorite strategies is using guaranteed replacement costs, which essentially says, if there's a fire, we've already decided what the dwelling cost is. So that's how, we've understood the dwelling value. So that's how much you would receive if there was a total loss. But it's a little different if there's something like a tornado or a big natural event, because then everybody has damage. You see work crews come up from all over the country, which means that labor costs go up through the roof and inventory goes way down. So usually what we see in those situations is with your standard carriers, people are getting checks for, the least amount that the carrier can get away with writing it for. That's usually enough to make critical repairs, but they might wait 3, 6, 9 months before labor costs go down, inventory costs go up, or inventory rises, and they're able to rebuild their home the way that it was with current market prices, which I like working with some premium carriers, because they say that's, if this is the situation, we're just going to build your house back right away. We'll pay more than the dwelling value if that's the case, because one, you're a client and we want you to have the best experience possible. In my mind too, that's great marketing for them. If your house is being built back first, your neighbors say, hey, why do I have to wait? Why can't I only make critical repairs and you're out here getting your home back? Well, we work with a carrier like Erie, for example, and I think that looks really good for them. So this is the coverage that I love being able to provide for my new homeowners. And then we also look at some areas where the premium carriers are really going to separate themselves from more of the big box type offerings. So being able to do things like siding and roof restoration, like if there's a hail claim, every insurance company is going to pay for the hail damage, but it might look like garbage. So with a premium carrier like Erie, they're going to say, in addition to fixing the roof, we'll also throw in an extra $10,000 to rewrap your siding or redo your shingles, so you have a nice finished product, which I really like. It's important to me that my clients have a really good experience if they do have to use their insurance. I'm also able to offer flat deductibles. You see all the time some of these carriers that say, hey, the deductible is 1% or 2% of the value of your dwelling. Well, if you have a $400,000 house, we're talking about a $4,000 or an $8,000 deductible. Not every family's prepared for that, but if you have a hole in your house because a tree fell on your roof, what are you going to do? So I like that I can offer clients a flat deductible, say of $1,000. So that way, if something happens, they can plan for it. They have that money available to be able to file the claim. And then there's some intricacies that you don't always hear people talk about, things like the responsibility of the piping. So all the pipes in your home, all the way out to the sewer main that connect to the city, are the responsibility of the homeowners. I see a lot of policies that don't have this language in them. And what it usually means is nothing until there's a claim. And that's when Elevated gets phone calls saying, hey, I have this hack insurance agent who didn't tell me about this, and they're not going to cover my claim. What do we do? And then we talk about, I wish that we would have had a chance to discuss this on the front end. Here's what we can do to help you right now. And then maybe in 4 to 6 weeks, we can reconnect and look at moving your policy over with a carrier who's wanting to cover some of those types of risks. So we feel really good at Elevated being able to offer such well-rounded and full coverage here. A couple other things. Most people that I work with when it comes to personal property do have more personal property than my friend Rob here, who can fit all of his personal property in one picture. So we're able to find the right level of coverage to make sure that if there was a fire or a theft or something like that, that your things can be replaced. And then we also want to talk about some of the intricacies, again, that you don't see in every policy. So this is the number 2 thing that probably confuses people. Not everyone talks about sewer and drain backup. So essentially what this means is you have your homeowner policy, and that's great. But if you have a sump pump that goes out because the power goes out, or it can't keep up with water coming in the house, or I don't know, maybe you have a 5-year-old that plugs a toilet or overflows a tub, all that water that comes out and is going to cause damage isn't covered by the standard homeowner policy. There's language inside the policy that's called sewer and drain backup that specifically covers the damage in those situations. If your agent didn't talk to you about that, you probably don't have that coverage. And if you walk downstairs and your basement looks like this, you're not going to be able to shop back that out. So what I recommend for all of my clients is if you have a standard Wisconsin basement, cinder block and concrete, we want to have at least $5,000 of sewer and drain coverage. What that does is it allows us to get a company in to get the water out, get the industrial commercial dehumidifiers down there, and get your basement back to zero. Now, if you have carpet, drywall, nice furniture, the built out bar, anything like that, we probably want to look at adding more coverage. And again, that's specific to every client. So at Elevated Insurance, we don't offer blanket solutions. We want to make sure that we understand how your current situation is set up, and we're solving specifically for what you need. I always talk with everyone, if you're moving, go out and spend $60, $80 on these clear Rubbermaids. One, you have to move your stuff anyway, so this is a great way to do it. But my wife and I will attest, this is an excellent way to organize. And I always tell people the best claim is one we don't have to file because you planned ahead. So it takes a lot of water before your things start to get damaged with this setup. So I always encourage people, if you're moving, especially if you're moving, pick up a few of these and do yourself a favor in case you ever do get water in the basement. The other piece we want to talk about is the specifics around our personal property. So if there's anything of really high value, collectibles, gun collections, golf clubs, wedding jewelry, anything like that, we want to make sure that we are specifically talking about that on the policy. So if anything happens to those things, it's really easy when we're filing the claim to say, hey, we talked about this, let's get them the money so that they can replace their collection. We want to go through and want to talk about specifically what that renter's or that homeowner policy is going to cost. But also when people are buying a home, almost always the mortgage lenders now are asking for escrow payments. Not everyone is real familiar with how that works. So this is the third piece that it's really nice to have someone to walk you through how this process works. So essentially what escrow means is the bank wants to be sure that if there's a big loss on this property, which especially on the front end, they're going to own most of the house. When you buy a home, you might put 5, 10, 20% down. The bank is holding the bag for the rest. So they want to be sure that their property is insured. So they say, you're going to pay for the whole homeowner's policy up front. And then each month when you pay your mortgage payments, we're actually going to set a little bit aside for your escrow. And then next year when your homeowners comes due, we'll have the money ready and we'll just make a payment on it again. So that's something that also can confuse new home buyers. And we want to be sure that everyone has a good understanding of how escrow works. And There just aren't any surprises when you go to the closing table or you have your first few months of mortgage payments. We want to make sure everyone understands and feels really comfortable with that. We always walk through how the money works. So we want to talk about, hey, the total package that we're talking about is this. If we break it up monthly or annually, this is what this looks like. We might have an escrow payment if we have a new home. And then always, if you do make the switch over to Elevated Insurance, we want to make sure that we help facilitate wrapping up with the other carriers. So once we have all of our paperwork done, we send over an email that says, thank you for your business. We talk a little bit more about how the referral program works, how the giving program works, how the volunteer program works. But we also have a short script and a phone number of your past carrier. So you can reach out to them, have your coverage wrapped up, and just make sure to get that box checked. Another thing I always want to touch on, and I know no one is ever excited to talk about life insurance, but for me, I mean, I'll never forget, I was at an airport when I heard that Kobe died. And that just kind of clicked with me to say, wow, this is probably one of the most physically fit, healthy, intelligent people in the public eye, and freak accident, and they passed away. So this can happen to everyone. I always want to be sure, hey, I'm wearing the same shirt. Look at that. I always want to be sure that everyone at least understands that everyone should have a life insurance policy that covers their current responsibility, their debt. So usually that's the mortgage, credit card payments, car payments, student loans. So in case a spouse or significant other passes away, at least we have some financial security, we have time to grieve, and it provides a little bit more breathing room in time of a really terrible situation. So I always want to make sure that clients, it doesn't have to be with me, but they have something set up outside of work that addresses life insurance. So again, we go over what questions people have. We ask underwriting questions to make sure that we have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed, and that we're good to go to provide the coverage. And finally, we want to be very respectful and say, hey, how do you buy? What else do you have on your mind? What else do we need to do to help you feel comfortable and confident to move your coverage over or to stay where you are? We look for, I always send an email over so everyone knows exactly what we've talked about, the specific numbers, what the costs are, how the payments work. So if a spouse can't be on the call, we can review those things and we can set a time to talk again and bind coverage or say, hey, we're going to stick with where we are. No matter what, we're always making that donation. So you can see we've had quite a bit of bigger numbers coming into 2020. We're excited for the back half of the year, and clients always know that we have those volunteer programs that are happening in the background supporting our community because we have people who buy insurance through us. Again, we are climbing the ranks as far as highest rated brokers in Wisconsin. I have a lot of people saying a lot of nice things about us, and we're really excited to continue serving our community the best way we can, which is helping with stuff that everybody needs at a elevated level of service, if you will. So I want to really appreciate you guys taking time to go through the video, learn about the most important things to consider when buying homeowners insurance, auto insurance, umbrella life insurance. And if you reach out to us, if you go through this conversation with us, we'll make a donation in your name on your behalf. And you also know you're supporting an organization that's supporting our local community. We always sign off our emails and our videos driven to serve, because that's really what it's about. The goal at our agency is to help people get where they're going. We all need insurance. So if you can find people who like planning ahead, people who appreciate a high level of service, a high level of integrity, and want some sort of give back in their insurance experience, as far as I'm aware of, there isn't a service like this in the country. So thank you so much for spending some time learning a little bit more about us. If you haven't reached out to us, please do. We'd love to walk through an insurance solution with you, make sure that you're in the best spot possible. And, as always, we encourage people to insure differently. And by doing so, we help people feel proud of the insurance that they have. Cheers.